you so much.
Big stories today, and here's another one because another candidate is officially entering the Republican race for the White House, and he is this man, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. He has essentially been in the race for some time, but he will officially announce his candidacy later today, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, in his home state. But he released this video, often the first step, this morning. Watch this.
I'm running for president to fight and win for the American people. Without sacrificing our principles, we won 3 elections in 4 years in a blue state. Did it by leading. Now we need to do the same thing for America.
Walker joins the other 14 Republican candidates who have officially announced. Marc Thiessen is a columnist with the Washington Post and a Fox News contributor and the author of Unintimidated, A Governor's Story and a Nation's Challenge. So he has spent quite a bit of time with Scott Walker working on that book, and he joins us now. Marc, good morning. Good to have you here today.
Good to be with you, Martha.
So, you know, people I think are kind of at saturation point. They've been learning about all these candidates, watching them get into the mix, but everybody's been waiting for Scott Walker to get in. Tell us what we should know about this man.
Well, I went into that book an admirer and came out a true believer. I mean, this guy, I got to see him up close, got to know his team, got to know his family, and he's a truly impressive individual. First of all, he's super smart. He came into office, he inherited a $3.6 billion deficit and turned it into $1 billion surplus without raising taxes, without cutting services for the poor, without decimating education. That is just absolute political genius. But second, he's a winner. This is a guy who took on the unions and won. He became the first governor in American history to face a recall election and win. He was reelected. He won 3 elections in Wisconsin in 4 years in a state that hasn't gone Republican for president since 1984, and he did it not by tacking to the center, but by governing as an unapologetic, full-spectrum conservative.
All right, so you see him as a reformer, and a lot of conservatives have asked that question, really, of each one of these potential candidates. Are you truly going to shake things up and reform? You know, you have to bring up what Trump has done in terms of galvanizing attention on these issues, for being a fighter and for not being afraid to say what's on a lot of people's minds. Can Scott Walker kind of do that? Can he do that, you know, in the form of a guy who's also walked the walk as governor?
No, absolutely. I mean, the difference between Walker and people like Trump and people like some of the other candidates in the Republican race is that he's not just a fighter, he's a fighter who wins. He's won, he's taken on tough fights, and he's won every single time. The left has tried, and there's probably no politician in America that the left has done more and spent more money to try to destroy than Scott Walker in the last several years, and he's still standing, and he's now one of the leading candidates for president. And the key to it is that in his recall election, 1 out of 6 people who voted for him in his recall planned to vote for Barack Obama that same year.
Yeah, that's
about 11% of those folks are Obama-Walker voters, so he can rally the base and win the Senate. There's no other candidate who can do that.
All right. You also say he's got a spine of steel. What do you mean?
Well, so when he was, to put this in perspective for you, when he was first elected, the Packers won the Super Bowl, and 56,000 people showed up at Lambeau Field celebrate. You know how many people were outside his office when during the protests in Wisconsin? 100,000. I mean, they spat on his staff. They urinated on his door. They sent death threats to his wife. One death threat came into his wife, promising to gut her like a deer, and he didn't buckle. Time magazine declared him Dead Man Walker. He was so in such a bad shape that he couldn't have possibly won his re-election, but he stuck to his guns because he believed what he was doing was right, and he was vindicated. The reforms worked, and he was re-elected not once but twice in a period of 4 years.
Well, he's convinced you. Now he's going to try to convince the American people and the GOP, for starters, as he gets into this race, and we'll see how he does. Very interesting. Thank you, Marc.
Thanks, Martha.